Linkin Park, finding it and discovering that band. Would you say, in your opinion, that there's a correlation between mental health and these music singers, artists? All right. Thank you, Jeff Blue, for coming on to the podcast. You have an exciting story, and I'm looking forward to hearing that story, especially with, Linkin Park, finding it and discovering that band.
Yeah,
And
I'm excited to be here, man.
All the success, man. It's honestly inspiring, and
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing that story, and especially the viewers, too.
Cool.
All right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's kick it off, man. So, let's just start off. Let's just go through your story, because I know that everyone's, pretty much everyone has heard of Linkin Park, whether it's in the Transformers, whether it's just the band and their music. But I think that you need some credit here. You need to get out your story, say who you
thanks,
are.
man. I think anybody who puts their career is in any form, whether it's business, creative, discovering and helping develop other people, is an admirational, job and a career. And I think we forget about that. The people behind those stars and everything. And, shout out to all those people who do A&R, which is called It's Artists and Repertoire. And it's the people who go out and discover new talent and nurture and build them. But yeah, man, I've been super blessed in my life to have been able to get into this field. And you're asking how I started?
Yeah, like let's just lean up to the way to where you came from, how you kind of got into the industry, what were you doing before music, kind of just like a little bit of your story on like how you got to where you are today.
Well, dysfunctional family and ambition, I guess.
What is that?
Yeah, man. I grew up in LA. I went to UCLA undergrad. I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon because at that time it was like, you either be a doctor or a lawyer. Got in somehow to UCLA in the honors kinesiology program. I used to be a fitness instructor all through high school. And I got into UCLA and immediately realized that I wasn't, I wouldn't say smart enough, but I didn't have that passion to be somebody dealing with blood, and blood grossed me out. I discovered. That's a good thing you want to do. If you're ever going to be a doctor, and you have an aversion to blood, don't be a doctor. I just didn't think that whole part through. But yeah, man, I went into UCLA and I somehow got into the communications department, and I interned for a guy named Harvey Levin. And I don't know if you all know who Harvey Levin is, but he runs TMZ. He's like super well known. But at that time, I was not really happy doing, I didn't really know what I was going to do with my career at UCLA. And I started doing commercial classes. I took a commercial class, like you see advertised in the back, like Be a Star.
Yeah.
And I actually took one of these classes, and 99.9% of the people are just nobodies and they never make it. But I somehow was that 0.001% where an agent actually came down and saw me, and he's like, "You should be in commercials, kid." And sent me on an audition. The first commercial I got was a National Pepsi commercial. And
nice.
So anyways, long story short, my commercials were airing when I was interning in the CBS News department, and Harvey Levin was a reporter there, and he was the legal reporter. He's like, man, he goes, you should be on camera. You should, go to law school and be a legal reporter like me. So that's what I did.
Straight up.
And I went to law school, and I was also in a rock band at the time. And when I was in law school, my buddy and I, who's a big lawyer now, hated law school. He went to USC. I went to Loyola.
Wait, hold on real quick. So law school reporter. So does that, so he said you were going to be
law reporter.
Yeah. So
legal reporter.
So you have to go to law school to do that. And you're just on TV more than a regular lawyer.
Well, Harvey's like, you should be out there covering all like the big cases. Like I would shadow Harvey when he was going to cover like a big legal case and be like, here we are, Harvey Levin for KCBS News, and we're interviewing blah, 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 and have the jury like, why did you vote against,
Yeah.
And so I thought, hey, that's cool, and went to law school, and during law school, I hated it so much that I started a new rock band with my roommate, Lee, and he was the singer, and I was the drummer, but I taught myself how to play guitar and keyboard during law school.
Okay.
And we started playing gigs. And the funny thing is I was so into the music thing that I did an intern for any like judges like you're supposed to
Right.
during law school, and I just focused on my band, and I had really long hair, earring.
Oh,
Still have
yeah.
the earring. I
But
brought the earring back actually.
was that like in the 80s, 90s?
It was the end of the 80s, yes. But thank you for dating my age here.
You don't look like it. You look young, man.
Thanks,
You
man.
look
So yeah, I did that, and I started a music magazine while I was in law school, and I also did TV commercials during that. So I was always in like the back of the row, and the professors was like, "Mr. Blue, can you tell us about the case between blah blah blah?" And I'm like, I can't. I can't. I was
like-
out at a show last night.
I'm like, I'm out of it, man. I'm focused
But
on
I
my
did
dream.
somehow pass. Well, not somehow. I studied for the bar, cut my hair, got rid of the earring, and then quit the band and passed the California bar, which is really tough.
Wow.
But-
This is going like 3 different directions all at once.
Well, the irony then is I'm like, hey, I passed the bar, and I started seeing my resume out, and no one would hire me.
Okay,
No
I see.
one. And so yeah, I finally, because of my journalism, I focused on being a journalist, and I started my magazine Crossroads, and then I wrote for Billboard Magazine, Hits, Entertainment Weekly, all right, Rip Magazine. There's a ton of magazines, and I figured the only way I was going to get a job, because I did intern for a few different record labels
Right.
during law school,
Okay.
and no one would give me a job, and so I was interviewing everywhere, and they're like, "We're not going to hire you. You have a law degree, and you're way too driven, and you're going to take our job." I swear, people, people
Wow.
interviewing me said, "I cannot hire you because you will take my job in 2 years."
Is that how like that industry? That's obviously that was how the industry was then. They were just
Well,
like,
it pretty much still is. Is that
you
like
intimidated them? You seemed like a
and
threat.
not intentionally. I was just driven.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of I
It's
think.
weird, dude. They wouldn't want someone like that on their team.
No, I was straight up told, "I'm not going to hire you." I had people tell me towards the end, "Take law school off your resume,"
Wow.
and ironically, I did, and that's how I got a job.
Nice. Well, hey, it worked out.
Mm.
Okay, so how does this? So I mean, you went from commercial to law school, to back out of law school, back to music. So it's like you're going multiple. You know,
Well, no, I did it all at once.
All at
I never
once.
quit anything. I didn't go out of any field. I think anything with life is gaining experience and not going, "Hey, I did that." It's incorporating all of your life experiences.
Got you.
Right. So when I was in law school, I used that ability. What you learn in law school, outside of the law, you got to always think about what you are learning in any type of field that could be applicable to other things.
Right.
So in law, I understood how to analyze something, because you're always analyzing a case, an argument, and I put that into journalism. So when I did my magazine, I was focusing on new artists, and so I was thinking, how can I describe this artist, their strengths and their weaknesses, in writing in a very short form. And I did that, and so I would talk about their songwriting, the performance, their marketability, and an overall synopsis.
Right.
And record labels started going, "Hey, this kid knows what he's talking about."
That's awesome.
And that's how I realized the only way I was going to get a job in the music business was to be relevant and to have something to say. And so that was being in front of people with my name in print, because what's really important is actually getting credit and having your name seen, so people go, "Oh, I recognize this." They see it enough and they're valuing it. You can bring something to the table. And luckily my vision was right, and I started sending out, all my articles. This is before you had the internet.
Right.
And my dad was like, "You're sending out all these articles to all these people, and you're running up a bill at my office." And he charged me like hundreds of dollars for postage.
Like,
True
yeah.
story. And so anyways, yeah, I finally got this one company called Zomba, and they owned Jive Records. Remember Jive back in the day? Yeah, it was early. They had like Houdini, all the hip hop rap stuff. And they had just started signing the Backstreet Boys
Okay.
and Britney Spears when I got there.
Okay,
And
I
they
see,
needed
I see.
somebody to deal with their publishing. And I got hired, and the first act I signed was my own band, because during law school too, I signed, I had a band.
Right.
And we were playing out, and I signed my own band, to a publishing deal, which is like probably not the, I don't know if it's like ethical, but I did, and I got my band a deal at a record label.
That's awesome, though. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, and it worked, and people were like, "Oh man, this kid's got some talent." And just to clarify, do you know what the difference between publishing and records is?
I think it would be good to explain it.
So publishing is when you write a song, you've got your writer share and your publisher share. So you retain both of those, but you have the ownership in those copyrights. So every time a song is played on the radio, every time somebody buys something, you have mechanical licenses, your pub licenses, everything. Long story short, that's the ownership of the song. A record label, when they come along, they are owning the masters, and so it's completely different. And so I was on the publishing arm, and
Owning the masters. Can you explain that?
yeah, so you own the physical embodiment, the actual the songs. I guess the difference would be,
The decision making on where the song goes.
yes, in terms, I mean, it's a whole nother podcast we should actually do. But it's different. The
Gotcha.
publishing side is different, and it's copyright ownership. It's
Okay.
not as sexy, and like
Right.
we're not putting out necessarily the records and all the fun
Okay.
stuff and working with the artist per se. It's more about the songs and the songwriters.
I got you.
So you can have an artist, and the artist may have 20 different writers.
Right.
We may represent one of the writers.
Okay,
Not, but
I
not
see,
necessarily
I
the
see.
artist. But I came along and I told my boss, I want to develop artists. And he's like, that's not what we do. And I said, I want to sign a band and get them record deals. And he goes like, the odds of that are so against you. And I said, I didn't care. That's kind of what I was doing as a journalist. I was developing artists. And he goes, again, this is not what publishing is. But I kind of changed the model of that. And I would sign small deals. And that's what I was doing. And so the risk was less.
Right.
But we own those songs. So ordinarily, a record label would come along, and if a band got a record deal,
Yeah.
the publishing value would go way up because the publishing company knew that those songs would come out.
I see.
Otherwise, the songs could just remain in the ether, never be heard by anybody, and you wouldn't make any money on that.
Right.
So
You know what I like about that story that you just told right there was that you went and took action on your own to pretty much get your band signed when you were the one that was signing it. But that's pretty much the prime example of you not letting excuses get in the way. That you said, I'm gonna get this done. I'm gonna find a way to make it happen. I'm gonna build my own path.
100%, and I think that's important in any field, whether it's music, entertainment, or any type of business. Is that you believe in yourself, you believe in the product, and you find a way to get it done. Because
No matter what.
most people are just like, hey, I'm doing this. This is the way to do it, and they expect things to happen to them.
Right.
Especially in this generation. And no offense, but it's like everybody's like, okay, if we get this many followers, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen.
Right. And it's
Never.
just not the case.
All that I experienced in my life was rejection, no, maybe, nah,
Yeah.
And so you have to be persistent. You have to find ancillary ways to get your product across.
Exactly.
And I did everything, and I wanted to learn about every field. And so when I was developing my band, I learned about songwriting, production, management, publishing, record deals, A&R. And ironically, I learned about A&R because I met with this guy who was a fraternity brother's brother, and he worked at this company called Geffen Records, which had like Guns N' Roses, Whitesnake, all these big rock bands, the Eagles, all that stuff. And I went to his office, and he thought I was a drummer in a band that he was trying to sign.
Yeah.
Long story short, I'm sitting in this guy's office, and he's like, "We're trying to sign your band." He goes, "We're gonna, stick you on airplanes. You're gonna be touring, all this stuff." And I'm
Selling
like,
you
"This is
on the vision."
amazing." And then he realized that I wasn't the guy in the band he was trying to sign, and proceeded to kick me out of his office. And I just said, I'm not leaving this office until I get something, whether it's knowledge or a deal out of this.
Right.
And the guy's like, you got to go. And I go, so what exactly is it that you do? And he goes, I do A&R. And I go, I don't get that. He goes, I go see bands and make decisions on which bands we should sign to the record label for a living. And I'm like, how's that even possible? Because I was in law school at the time.
Yeah. This is early.
Yeah, this is early. I'm going back to,
No, yeah,
90. And he's like, that's what I get paid to do. I'm like, how would anybody pay anybody to go see bands for a living and make decisions like that? Because I want that job.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I was in a rock band. I'm like, I'm in a rock band. I'm in law school. And he's like, yeah. Kid, you got to go. He goes, if you want to learn more, I'm guest lecturing at this class at UCLA. And again, this was 1990,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I go, well, can I go? He goes, well, you got to buy a ticket. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm broke. Anyways, of course, I snuck into this class and sat in the back row.
Again, making sure it happens, building your own path. You
Yeah,
gotta
and I
suck
sat in
in.
the back row, and I just was like, my whole life changed. And I was like, this is what I've got to do. And I'm in law school. I'm second year in law school. I'm like, this is what I have to do in my life. And I felt like that this was my path. And I think anybody that has ever had that like epiphany, like this is what I'm meant to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do this.
We'll make it happen.
You got to make it happen. And that's what I did in the back of that class. And Kyle, I was teaching that class 5 years later. I was teaching the same
crazy.
class. And I had no experience in music. None. It was like, but that's what got me into interning and then writing for the music magazines, because that was my second year in law school. And I go, I have to get into this business no matter what it takes.
All that streamlining of events, just one decision of you going to that guy that said, you're not the right person, I'm not even supposed to be talking to you, I'm not leaving until I get some kind of value.
Yeah.
And then it led to that string of events. It's just insane.
Yeah,
It's absurd.
it is. I think everybody that's really successful in life is a little bit crazy.
I
A
would
little
agree.
bit.
I would agree.
But you got to be driven like nothing else. I mean, drive and persistence is probably the most important characteristic, even with artists. I mean, you may have the most talented person, the most talented singer, the most talented, engineer or whatever. But it's the drive,
Right.
that desire to succeed that will matter more than anything, and propel that person above the most talented people. I'm not the most talented person in what I do, but I have belief, faith, and
Obsession.
drive.
Complete obsession over it. Yeah, no, 100%.
But you've got to have the requisite talent. Let's not,
Right.
and the ability to understand and explain your vision.
Right.
That's another important thing. Is like
Huge.
being able to explain what you're seeing and your vision in a clear, concise way.
1,000%. I couldn't agree more. That's amazing though. Going off that, I wanted to ask you. So when this was happening, what led you to discovering Linkin Park?
So I got this job.
Yeah.
And I convinced my boss to give me the ability to sign some bands. And as I said, I was lecturing at UCLA.
Right.
And I there's one class that I was going to teach, and it was a guest lecture, and I wasn't going to go to the class. And again, this is all about being in the right place at the right time, but putting yourself in the right place at the right time. And I had another event to go to, and I was about to cancel this. I just couldn't make it. And something in the back of my head said, go to this class at UCLA. And so I made it there just in time, and I had just signed this woman to a development deal for $4,000, and her name was Macy Gray.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Macy Gray was rejected by every single record label. She was dropped by a record label, Atlantic Records, right before I found her. Dropped by her manager, dropped by her publisher. This woman was like, passed on nonstop. And I had just signed her, and because I believed in her, I go, there's some magic here. And mind you, fast forward, she won Grammys, Best New Artist, singles, all this stuff. One of the most iconic R&B singers. But I'm going to this UCLA class, and I need an intern to help me shop Macy. We were making cassette tapes at that time,
Right.
back in the cassettes, and CDs, and sending out CDs, but it was really cassette. I mean, this is 1996, 97, 96. And so I'm looking for this intern, and I played the Macy Gray demo, and kids are like, I'm not really feeling it. But there's this one kid in the audience who's like, hey, I get it. Not my style, I'm a rock guy, but I get the R&B thing. And again, we can talk about why I signed Macy.
Right.
Being a rock guy, I signed, an R&B singer. But he came into me and he's like, man, he goes, I want to be your intern. I'm like, okay, well, hit me up later.
Yeah.
And I proceed to go to this party, Rager party at Interscope for Interscope Records. Come in the next morning completely exhausted, and in my office is seeing this kid. Same kid, but he's not just in my office. He's sitting in my chair, in my office.
Okay.
And I'm like, no joke. Yeah. And I'm like, who the hell are you? And what are you doing in my chair? And he's like, I was in your class yesterday. I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to make appointments, And somehow he got by, the front desk girl who, I don't know, that's a whole nother story. But he's sitting there, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, he looks at my wall, and I also signed a band called Limp Bizkit and Korn. And Core and I had signed because I had reviewed them in my magazine years before they got signed. And I had published deals with both of them. And he looked at the plaques and he goes, and I was, oh, so Matchbox 20 was up there too.
Okay.
And he looks up there and he goes, I'm going to have a band that's bigger than all these bands. I'm like, dude, I go,
Who's this guy?
yeah. I'm like, bro, I'm like, you're insulting. It was insulting, but I'm like, I love this confidence. I love this drive. And he was very, very articulate about, and there was reasons behind everything he talked about. He just seemed intelligent and driven. And I'm like, man, you know, and I had a stack of people. My front desk assistant kept coming in with like, this person wants to be your intern, like,
Right.
you know. And I literally sat there and like, I found my intern, this kid, and his name was Brad Delson. And
There you go.
we, 3 months into, I think about 3 weeks into our internship, he goes, hey, I'm making my first demo. And he gave me a demo, and it was really rudimentary. Like, they made it in an apartment, and it was just like a home demo. And I heard promise in it, but it was really raw. And but it wasn't good, but it was really good at the same time. You know, like you could see that's part of the job, is being able to see the vision.
Right.
And back then, you know, you didn't have all the Pro Tools and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
using, I think, Cubase or something. And there was early versions of stuff. And there was just some magic in there, and they had never played a show yet, this band. And they were called Xero, Xero.
Right.
And he goes, yeah, we're playing a show. I came down to the show at the Whiskey, and it was pretty bad. It was awful. Everybody kind of walked out of it, and I was like, man, there's something here. There's something, you know, it's not, there's something missing, but there's something here.
Right.
And it just gnawed at me. And I had the guys come into the office the next day, and I go, I want to do a deal with you, just like I did with Macy Gray, a very small risk development deal where I spend the time, develop you, we do some demos, we have a little demo fund, and then if I get you a deal, then there's a step up. And then you get like an extra $10,000,
Right.
which is still small, because mind you, back then publishing deals were like a minimum like $150,000,
Right.
and I'm doing deals for $4,000.
Yeah.
You know, and the publishing deals would be up to, you know, $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. I'm doing the smallest deal possible because the risk was higher.
Right.
But I would sell the bands on it, and I wouldn't say sell, I promised the bands, you're going to get me. You're not going to get somebody just going, hey, we're owning it and not doing any creative work.
Right. You're going to be all in.
And I always say to everybody, my career is attached to your career. We're in the same boat, sink or swim, because I really didn't have any massive success at that time. Everything, Limp Bizkit, Korn, they were just starting off.
Right.
You know,
That's got to make a band feel good, though, to have that backing, someone to lean on, especially when you're getting started. That, you know, this guy's not gonna leave me behind. He's gonna go all the way with me.
it helps, but you wouldn't believe most of the people would go for the bigger check
Right.
and the bigger name behind it, the company.
Right.
And nobody had heard of Zomba.
Which means more security for them, but at the same time, they're probably not gonna get the same support that you would.
Yeah, but the bigger labels, I'll go, oh no, we're here. You've got a team of all these people. We're gonna be there for you. And I would tell the artist that's impossible. How are they going to be there for you when they've got, you know, 1 million copyrights?
Right.
You know, 1 million artists. And I go, I've got like 3.
Exactly.
And so I'm here for you. And I'm a young kid. I was, you know, 27, 28. And I was like, my career is dependent on you. If you don't succeed, my career in the music business is like usually 3 years, if you're lucky. And like, I'm in year 2. I need to have success. And that's what it was. And they believed in me. And those kids were in the office every day I was going through songs with them, giving them advice. But that's how it started. And they had a different singer at the time, this guy, Mark Wakefield, who really great guy, good singer. But, you know, we can get into how that all changed as well.
Right. Okay. That's amazing. So this guy just popped up in your classroom one day, and it's just game over from there.
Well, you never knew. I liked him. I felt like he was a younger brother to me, and I wanted to mentor him in, you know, the record business. His parents were pushing him to go to law school. We grew up in the same area, and I was like, this is a little brother that I never had, and I wanted to kind of embrace that and you know, teach him the ropes.
Right. 100%. So then you were able to find, obviously, the next singer. Well,
Well, okay. So the crazy thing is, I believed in this band so much that I was willing to do anything. I was setting up showcases. Now showcases for those of you who don't know what showcases are like auditions. So
okay.
a band generally would have to play, hundreds of shows and get a following and get press, radio before a record company is going to look at them. Well, I was the publishing company, so I had already done a deal to own for the company to own all their songs, all their music that they did. So now it's like, okay, how are people going to hear it? You've got to get a record deal.
Right.
That's where the money is. The record company is
Right.
going to give you the money to make the album to get out, and the record company works it to radio.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, we showcased, and I set up showcases for every record label in the music business, and that was we showcased for Warner Brothers 3 times, 3 separate times, 3 different executives were invited to come down, and they all passed. Every single record label in the book, independent across the world, passed on the band, and I was devastated. I'm like, what are they not seeing? And in the back of my mind, I always knew that it was the communicator. We had a rapper and a vocalist, and Mike Shinoda was the rapper, or he is the rapper, and main songwriter, and the other main songwriter was this kid, Mark. And I just wasn't ever convinced. I was always like, hey, I hope I hope he does good this time. You can't have that. You can't hope that something's,
Right.
you have to know without question that you have all the confidence in your quarterback, in your front man, right? If you can equate it to sports, you don't want to hope that the quarterback's going to carry the game.
Right.
The whole team has to be great, but if you're not hitting the mark every time, and that was the problem. And so
See.
I had to make a horrible, intense decision to talk to the band and say, we've got to get rid of the lead singer. And this was a founding member of the band, and that alone was like the first drama.
Right.
And immediately like, well, you want to get rid of our best friend and the guy who started the band, and I'm like, I don't have any choice. We've tried this for 2.5 years and it's not working.
Right.
And we've all got to be cohesive and understand that, everybody was going to go to grad school at this point. Mike was going to be an artist, and Brad was going to go to law school, and their parents are blowing me up going like, hey, our kid can't be doing this. And we're pulling them out of the band. And long story short, we fired the singer, and we couldn't find anybody because everybody was like, every singer that was any good was like, we're not feeling the band, or we heard this band is already showcased for every record label and they've been rejected.
Yeah.
So it was like double whammy. And the interesting part, I forget, this all happened after. Okay, so rewind like
Yeah.
a week before this happens.
Yeah.
The band's like, we're not getting rid of the singer.
Right.
We want to do a big showcase and get everybody out. Jeff, you have all that power. And I had just signed, I just gotten Macy Gray a deal at Epic Records. So I was like this big, I kind of had a name for myself.
Right, right.
I'm like, okay, if you really believe Mark's going to be able to do this, right? And so we gave him I gave him the shot, to do another big show at the Whiskey. And literally every single record executive, I mean, we're talking Clive Davis to, the heads of every record label.
Right.
Everybody showing up in limos.
All of them.
And it was kind of freak accident because I did this showcase during the Christmas, like right before Christmas. So everybody was in LA. All the big New York execs were in Los Angeles for the Christmas dinners.
Yeah.
And so they brought down all the heads of radios, and it was just like,
man.
I'm sitting there, and then everybody's coming to like, dude, Rick Rubin's here, blah, blah, blah. Everybody. It was crazy. The head of Sony worldwide. Everybody was in this room, and I'm like, oh my God, this is okay. Have faith. This is going to go well. I'm praying. And sure enough, it was probably the worst show you've ever seen. And everybody exited that building. The Whiskey A Go Go, and it was sure you could hear crickets chirping at the end of the show. It was like everybody left. And we had to make a decision on what to do after that moment. And that's when I said, we've got to get rid of the singer.
Dang, that's wild. That's actually wild.
Yeah, and you would think, Kyle, that at that point, the band would dissolve and everybody give up.
Right.
You lost your singer. You lost your quarterback. That's the hardest person to find because that's your voice.
Right. Yeah, I mean.
What are you going to do? And I said, we
your
will
backbone,
find. I
man.
go, don't give up. we will find a vocalist. And we couldn't find one for about, I guess it was 3-4 months. And again, it was being in the right place at the right time. I was at South by Southwest with this attorney named Scott Harrington. And he goes, hey, your band that everybody hates, they were called Zero. And he goes, I think I may have somebody. I'm like, who is it? I'm whatever. Let me get him on the phone right now.
Yeah.
We go up and we're kind of buzzed because we're drinking at South by Southwest is one of the biggest like music festivals for unsigned acts and everything, and in Austin, Texas. And we go up to his suite and I'm like, let's call this kid now. I don't know what he looks like. I don't know what his voice is like. I just all of a sudden have this excitement over this kid that somebody told me about.
Right.
Because it wasn't that I'm desperate, but I'm just like, I will listen to anything.
Yeah.
And Scott dials the phone and this woman answers, and it's this woman named Samantha Bennington. And Scott's like, hey, get Chester, this guy named Chester on the phone. I'm like, Chester, that's such a weird name. And I remember thinking to myself, when I signed Limp Bizkit,
Yeah.
Fred Durst, that's you don't too many singers named Fred. Well,
Right.
Freddie Mercury. But
Yeah.
either way, Fred was an iconic, Fred Durst became iconic with Limp Bizkit. And I'm like, all right, let me talk to this guy, Chester.
Right.
And he gets on the phone and he's like, hey, man, what's up? And Scott goes, hey, this guy, has this band. And he totally lied to him. He goes, it's blowing up. Actually, maybe I did that. I told Chester, I go, hey,
Selling the
man,
vision.
I get on the phone and I'm like, that was me, unfortunately, yeah. I go, Chester, nice to meet you, man. I go, I got this band that's blowing up, and which
vision.
obviously were rejected by everybody. There's no blowing up of any type. And I said, I would love to hear your voice. I hear it's good, and I go, I want you to, go record a demo for me based on the songs. I want to hear your voice over these songs that the band's done. And he's like, okay, when? I go, well, why don't you do it right now? He's like, right now, it's my birthday. And
Wow.
I have a few drinks in me, maybe multiple.
Yeah.
And I go, well, Chester, this is your moment. It's your birthday. I need you to show me what your dedication is like. I go, if you really want to be a singer, if you want to have a career in the music business, you're going to do this right now. He goes, you want me to leave my birthday? I go, I'm going to send you these demos and you do it. He goes, well, tomorrow's my birthday. I go, well, you'll have them tomorrow. And so he, I guess, left his party, recorded the demos, had them FedExed back to me. And when I got home in Los Angeles, there was the tape on my desk. And I popped it in my car stereo on the way home. And my mouth dropped open. And I was like,
Dang.
I had chills. The hair on my arm stood up. I'm like, this is it.
That's
And I go, am I
wild.
convincing myself because I want it so bad? And I listened over and over and over blasting. I'm like, this is the voice. This is that chemistry. This is what is going to change the world. Now, all I had to do was tell the band about it.
How they take it.
Well, at first they're like, well, you can't tell us who's blah, blah, blah. Going to be a singer. I'm like, I know, but you got to hear it. And,
Right.
they all came into the office and they're like, yeah, it's okay. I'm like, okay. I go, this voice has power, conviction. It emotes. There's highs, there's lows. He understands the song that you guys created and brought it to the next level. And they're like, well, we don't know. And I go, well, he's coming to the office tomorrow.
Dude, this is like a movie.
Yeah, well. So I'm all now stressed out that the band doesn't like him.
Right.
And they're like, what does he look like? I'm like, oh, man, he's got blonde hair, ponytail pulled back. I'm like, he's a stud. The guy's like, huge. And I go, and frankly, I had no idea what Chester looked like at all. Again,
no idea.
I had no photographs. I'm just imagining this guy because of his voice.
Right.
And again, so I was bullshitting the band. I'm like, it's just a picture of this kid I had in my head. So they're like, okay, well, we'll be the judges of that. And I'm like, okay, cool. So the next day, Chester arrives, and my assistant at the front is like, hey, that singer is here. I'm like, is he like, rock star? And they're like, I think you need to see for yourself. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And he comes in, and this kid, Chester, really scrawny, big smile on his face. Like his hair was like dyed black and it was like twisted into like these curly like little spikes. And I was like, this is the farthest thing from a rock star I could ever imagine, Kyle. I was like, I had, I don't know, it was cold flashes, hot flashes. I started sweating, and I don't sweat. I'm like, what did I do? Oh my God. And I go, hold on one second. I call the lawyer, and I go, bro, this kid's not a rock star. And he's like, no, he's alternative looking. I'm like, yeah, but yeah, like, there's no way. And so I'm like, he goes, go back in there. Oh yeah, I go back in, and I thought back because when I met Macy Gray, she did not look like a rock star at the time, and we created a image around her. And I sit down to Chester, and I talk to Chester. I'm like, so I go, the guys are going to be here any minute. I'm like, how do you get that voice coming out of you? You know, I'm thinking about this, and he's like, man, I just sing, you know, from my heart. And I'm like, I thought, and I'm like, maybe this kid is a rock star. Maybe it's just his image isn't necessarily reflecting that. And what I found, Kyle, is that when you go through a process of developing, not everything develops at the same time. When something's real, your image, that confidence in that music, and that it emotes into your image and your music and your creativity overlap, and they become one.
Yeah.
And
evolve into it.
Yeah, at the same time, and that's what happened. I mean, Chester ended up looking like a massive rock star. But when I met him, the opposite. It was crazy. Like, and the band at first didn't like him. You know, they were not into him at all as a singer. And they waited, I guess it was like 4 months before, you know, and Chester was sleeping on couches, sleeping in cars. And, you know, finally the band, after auditioning so many people, were like, I go, we've got to make a decision. I'm betting everything on this kid Chester. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll go with it. And yeah, from there, guess what happened?
Say it.
More rejections. Rejections by every single record label again. And I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, I was wrong. I was wrong about this kid. He didn't carry the band. I was so confident, and we changed the name. Because everybody passed on it. We changed the name to Hybrid Theory. Sent it out again. Everybody's like, oh, we can't wait to see your new band, Hybrid Theory. They come out like, dude, this is the same band as Zero.
It's the same people.
And that's what it was. And it was just rejections all over again. So that's why Warner Brothers, who they ended up signing to, came out 3 times. And they're like, you're trying to bamboozle us, and we're not stupid. This is the same band as Zero. And I'm like, yeah, man. I go, you're missing the whole point. There is songs here, and this kid's a star. This is the real deal. But I think once we had to do that with Macy Gray too.
Right.
And I don't mean to backtrack, but Macy Gray had such a bad stink attached to the name Macy Gray, because she was passed on and dropped, that I changed her name to Mushroom. Wow. And that's how I was able to get people out. You know, people thought they were seeing a new
singer,
artist. Yeah. And because her music was different, everybody was like, Mushroom, this is Macy Gray, but they gave her that second chance.
That's super interesting.
And she got a huge deal.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what I did.
You're pulling out all the tools from the toolbox. That's smart. That's
change the name, confuse people a little bit, like, you know.
Yeah.
Sidetrack them.
It's like a rebrand, and they
reboot.
But it worked.
Well, people passed on the Hybrid Theory too, and then, but then Macy Gray blew up.
Yeah.
And so people were offering me deals to go from publishing to a record label, which was my dream. Okay. I didn't want to be a publisher anymore. I didn't want to be the guy, you know, doing like small deals for like $4,000. I had also brought a Nickelback for $4,000.
Right,
if you remember that band, but
it
became huge, and I didn't get to, my boss didn't even want to sign that for $4,000. But I wanted to be making records, and so I got offers from all these record labels: Sony, Warner, I think Def Jam, Arista, BMG, and nobody wanted to sign my band Hybrid Theory. I go, I have to be able to sign this band if you want me to come work for you. And everybody's like, no, we aren't interested then, except Warner Brothers, because the guy that had passed on the band previously, there was a new guy that I met out in New York. He goes, I'm going to let you sign this band, Hybrid Theory. And I said, great, sign me up. I signed to Warner Brothers. The band signed to Warner Brothers simultaneously, but I couldn't get out of my Zomba publishing deal for like another 9 months or something like that. I was signed, you know, contracted to work for them. So I finally get out of that deal, and no joke, it was like a week before I'm supposed to start at Warner Brothers, and I get a call from the guy who hired me. I'm like, yo, what's up? What's up? And he goes, man, I have some bad news to tell you. I'm like, bad news? My life's going great. And he's like, no, this is bad news. He goes, I'm no longer going to be at Warner Brothers. I'm like, what are you talking about? This guy, Joe McEwen, put all his faith in me, put his faith in the band Hybrid Theory, and now all of a sudden he tells me he's not going to be there. And I go,
what does this mean for the band?
what does this mean? He goes, well, I got some bad news too. Double bad news. I'm like, what's that, Joe? And he goes, well, David Kahn is your new boss. And I'm like, David, he passed on Hybrid Theory 3 times.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, he's like, yeah. And he goes, you need to talk to him because I don't know if he's sold on you either as an A&R guy. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Are you telling me that my new boss is not you? It's this guy who, A, doesn't like me supposedly and definitely doesn't like the band. He's like, yeah, unfortunately, that's the case.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, it was beyond rough. So I'm like, all of a sudden, that was the first wake up call that I got that nothing in life is permanent. Right. That stuff, especially in entertainment, is constantly moving, and it's going to happen. You are, no matter what, going to be faced with drama when you least expect it, and you've got to be able to maneuver and think about, okay, what's my next step? But you don't want to react.
Right.
You don't want to react in a negative way. You
Right.
want to take a step back and go, okay, how am I going to deal with
That's
this?
the best way to go forward in this issue.
And but I reacted. I freaked out.
Did you?
And it's like,
Well,
I was like, oh my God. So I set up the lunch was set up for me, and David proceeded to tell me, without much introduction, he goes, I know about you, blah blah blah. I would never have signed Macy Gray. So I'm like, okay, that's odd to say because that was my biggest artist. And then I passed on your band Hybrid Theory, and I don't know if we should keep them at the record label. I'm like, oh my God. I go, I haven't even started here yet, and you're telling me this. I'm like, my life is like going down the toilet.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, he goes, but I'm going to give you a chance. He goes, I've heard good things about you, so I'm going to give you a chance. And I'm like, a chance? I've waited my entire life for this job. I mean, I literally waited my entire life. I turned down other offers that were double the size in salary just so I could go to Warner Brothers because I could sign Hybrid Theory, which became Linkin Park. And so I'm sitting there going like, God, did I make the wrong decision? I made a decision on my heart because I wanted to sign the band,
Right.
and I should have just taken the money. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? So I leave that meeting. I go directly to Warner Brothers, and I met with the head of marketing. And I said, I want to get this band moving. He goes, you haven't even started here. I'm like, let's get them in the offices, and let's get this process moving. Because I knew my band, which was going to become Linkin Park, was already on the chopping block to get thrown out of the label.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
It's time to put the foot on the gas pedal.
yeah,
Right.
before I even started this
Yeah.
drama.
Yeah. Dang, dude, that's wild.
Yeah. Not fun. I'm getting high. I'm gonna take this jacket off. That's
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. It was just reliving that process was crazy, man. So
So let's go into this next topic because that's a crazy story, and I kind of want to get an idea from your perspective. So obviously, let's fast forward a couple of years. Linkin Park had some music that was completely viral, like cross countries.
mm-hmm.
What are like specific elements that you would say need to be in that kind of songwriting to be able to do that?
Well, I mean, what we should even focus on first was understanding self and the artist. The A&R exec understand the producer, understand the artist, but the artist understand the artist. And how does that evolution come about? And what happened with Linkin Park was we went in the studio a little prematurely. Usually you would have all your songs laid out. The band didn't have all their songs laid out. They had some, but they had pieces of some songs. So because we were forced, we were going to get dropped.
Yeah, you had to move.
Not only we have to move, we were moving, and I had to explain to the band why we were moving so quickly. and be positive at the same time.
Right.
And that's hard to do and not freak them out. Was I able to do that? No. You know, one thing I learned, but so we go into the studio and there were pieces of songs. I didn't think we had all the songs yet, but there were riffs that Brad had. There was ideas that Mike had, and Chester had this one bridge, this song called Blue. And I was like, the song isn't that great, but this bridge, which is the bridge, you know what a bridge is? The middle part, it's kind of a different theme. And we should talk about the elements of a song. But a bridge, it usually goes like, you know, you've got your verse, your intro, your verse, your pre-chorus, chorus. Chorus could also be called a hook. Then you have, you know, it repeats again, and then you go into a bridge, which is another evolution of the song that takes you into another chorus and then a breakdown and an outro.
Gotcha.
So whole songwriting thing, but there was a bridge to the song, and I was like, "That's amazing! Let's create something, you know, out of that." And the band did that, and I mean, and then became one of the biggest hits they ever had.
Which was
Crawling, and so there was just, it was rushed, but with that, you either, in life, I find it's very, very true that drama and stress will either cause you to be the victim or the victor. And you can have things go wrong around you, go like, okay, this is going to unravel this. I can't work like this, blah, 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 blah. And then realize you have a fallback as an excuse. Or you can go, I'm going to use this setback as fuel to my fire to strive ahead and prove everybody wrong. And that's what the band did. And that's kind of what I had in my life. You know, I was told that because this rejection, this drama was nothing new to me.
Right.
This was like constant, you know, my which we didn't get into. My family life was, they told me I was, you know, failure, a loser, like you're not going to go into law. And
that's gotta be tough.
We didn't go into that. And we should talk about mental health and artists and creative people.
I have a couple questions about that in regards to that for sure.
Yeah, so the band
adversity,
took this,
just taking adversity,
took the adversity and said, "Hey, screw the label. We're gonna make this happen." And I was like, "That's exactly what needed to be done." Because most people would be like, "Oh God, worried about this." They were just like, you know, F the system. This is our chance. And so we went in and we started making the album, and it just, you know, the pieces came together. I'm like, okay, this is a great song. This is a great song. We recorded 14, 15 songs, and, you know, I think 11 made the record. I mean, again, this is 1999.
Jeez, yeah.
And, you know, Chester was just blossoming, and Mike was, everything was just like full force, and I was proud of this. And then...
And these are the songs that are being rushed. Like, you got to make some moves.
They're being created in the studio.
That's insane, dude.
Like, One Step Closer was literally all those hooks. Like, I mean, like, Shut Up When I'm Talking to You. That all came about in the studio. That was just magic,
just wild,
right?
Dude. That kind of like adversity, like when you are in motion, I feel like that's kind of when you can see some of the best work be created, though. Like being speed, but like also like we need to make this work. We have no alternative.
And ironically, now that doesn't happen because now record labels want to see everything. They want to see your entire fan base. They want to know exactly how the songs are going to be because that's what they expect from the artist. There's not a lot of development. So we're in the studio and all this is happening. And my boss calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I want to come down." I'm like, "It's not ready yet. This is early. This is like a week or two into or maybe about a week or two into the session."
Gotcha.
I'm like, "No, this is not ready. It's not yet. Not time." He's like, "Well, you know," he goes, "You said you have a lot of great stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, I was just doing that to hype him up." You know, he's like, "Well, I'm coming down." I go, "Okay, when?" You know, next few days. I'm coming down now.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, "Oh God." Oh, it was, and I tell him, I go, "You know, come down tomorrow. Give us a minute." Right. So we go in there, we put everything together for him. He comes in and he's just like super stoic faced, and he's like, "Next song." I'm like, "Oh God." He didn't even listen to the whole song, and I'm sitting there like sweating, and I'm like, God, just the energy was so bad. You know, like when somebody walks into a room and it's just like your energy gets sucked out of you, like all the oxygen's out, and he's like, "Oh God, this sucks." You know, like, and he's like, okay, next. I'm like,
I definitely felt that.
And so I walk out, and he first says, he goes, "Hey, good job, guys, good job." I'm like, when anybody tells you good job, hey, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
That's, you know, the equivalent of It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it sucks.
Yeah. No
And
other
so I walk
specific
out,
comment.
and the band's all like, "Oh, he liked it." I'm like, "Oh."
No.
So I go out to my boss's car, and he's like, it's better than I thought. And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And he goes, "But that rapper's got to go." I'm like, "The rapper?" I'm like,
Jeez, dude.
what are you talking about? He's like, I can't. He's like, no. He's like, that singer's way better than I thought. I'm like, yeah, Chester's incredible, but he's like, yeah, keep the singer, but he's like, the rapper, no. I'm like, the rapper wrote most of the songs, and and I go, I know he needs some work. He's like, come to my office and we'll discuss it. So next day I'm into his office, and he's like, I've got this guy. I forgot the artist's name. I just blanked on it, but it turns out he was working. Supercat or whatever. Anyways, he was working with him on this band, Sugar Ray, and I didn't know that he had signed this different rapper. He's like, I'm going to put this rapper into what would become Linkin Park. It was Hybrid Theory at the time. And I'm like, you can't just do that, man.
Dude.
And he's like, well, that's what we're going to do. He goes, this is not working out. He goes, it's, And so I'm like, okay, well, let me figure this all out. I'm like, this is not just happening. I mean, this is like another
Gotta talk
major.
to the band. Yeah, it's gonna be really.
So I
exciting.
talked to Chester, I talked to Brad, and they're like, yeah, we can't do this. I'm like, well, how do we get around this? Because David he's finding any way to drop the band. And long story short, we came after some discussion. I come to my boss and I just said, I go, look, the rapper's staying, Mike stays, but he's like, well, he can't be on all the songs. He's like, I want him minimized. And I'm like, I mean, it was so bad, dude, that he was like, maybe have him in the back. I'm like, you can't do that,
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to balance this. He's like, well, your job's on the line. He goes, it's either you and the band go, or like, you do what I say. And so I, as a young exec, what do you do? So I talked to the band about it, and they just, they get super upset. I'm like, well, let's have Mike on all the songs, but I won't tell my boss that. And we kind of manipulated it so that he was on some a little less.
Yeah.
And that wasn't lying to my boss. But long story short, it was horrible. And the pressure and the hurt that it caused the rapper, Mike Shinoda, is immense. I mean, it's, and as a young exec, I didn't know how to deal with that, and I'm like trying to save the band, trying to save my job.
Yeah, you're being a middleman between.
And I should have given it
positions.
to the manager.
Right.
And that's one of the things you learn in managing other people and being a creative as well as a business exec about what do you do in a situation like that. So it caused a lot of unrest, but it did create an immense amount of energy that came through in that music. And that's how, all that anger and that fuel and that emotion came through in the Hybrid Theory album.
That's amazing, though. That's...
It is incredible. And then but it was the point, and I was so hard on Mike Shinoda. And I literally go back and I remember times in the studio, I'm like, it's not working. And I didn't do it out of being an asshole or a jerk. It was like, I knew it wasn't up to what his level of expertise could be.
Right.
And I had to push. And you don't know, sometimes, when you like push so hard, you feel it. You're like, you're being at that point when you know you're not getting it. How do you communicate that without, and it's so hard when you're working with creative people because their emotions are so tied into their performance and you're criticizing their heart and their soul.
Right.
And it's so difficult to be a creative exec telling somebody, no, it's not working. I know you can do it, but this is not it, and getting frustrated. And that's what happened in that studio until one day they're like, hey, we can't do this anymore. Like we did, I would make notes, constant notes, like scratch this line, blah, blah, blah. I'm not feeling this line I'm not feeling. And it was just like, it was tedious. And I knew it was just so much. And Brad called me down, the guitar player, he called me down one night. He's like, hey, he goes, man, we did everything you said. We don't know if we're doing it right. Come on down and listen. And I was like, it was late at night. I go into the studio. I go into a private room, and I listen to it. And I realized that I'd always be making these notes on this yellow pad of paper. I had no notes. And I literally sat there, and tears were coming out of my eyes. I was like, this is it. This is the first artist I'm ever exec producing, A&Ring for a major label. and tears are coming out of my eyes. And I walk into the studio room and like, oh my God, you're crying, you hate it. I'm like, no, this is amazing. This is it, guys. This is it. Like, wait, you like it? I'm like, this is it. I was like tears of joy. I'm like, you guys freaking did it. This I believe. I believe. Except for a couple little things, everything in here. I mean, like
Yeah.
a couple little things, but I'm like, you did it.
That's
You
amazing.
freaking did it. And I just this wave of, honestly, euphoria, but I knew I had been so tough on them. Like, and when you think, hey, you finally did it, that doesn't negate all the stress that was in creating that piece of art. And that album ended up, being the best-selling album of the 21st century for a debut album.
That's amazing.
But the label still wanted to drop it.
After it was top selling?
No, not after it was top
Yeah, that's what I was
selling.
gonna
But
say.
before we turned it in, it was just there's a couple guys in radio that really liked it. This guy Rob Goldklang, Mike Ripberg, Tom
Gotcha.
Deary. They believed in it, but my boss was still like, I don't know if we're feeling it. And he went
He
and
had a vendetta
remixed the song.
against it.
He had to have his say in
He had a
it.
vendetta against it,
and
for sure.
tried to remix the first single, and
Yeah.
that just created more drama. But on top of that, then right after we finish, we're finishing the record, the label comes and goes, hey, you guys can't have the name Hybrid Theory. So they basically
They're just knocking you down every step of the way.
yeah, they go, Hybrid Theory we can't have as a name. There's another band called Hybrid. And so the band's like, are you kidding? Is this a joke? And I thought it was a joke. I'm like, no, that's serious. We got all this information, these letters from legal department. And so the band, Chester, ended up coming up with the name Linkin Park. And I'm like, it's a great name because they had band names like Pleer. I'm like, and I have to tell them that name sucks. And it sounds like Pleer, like
Yeah.
Platinum Lotus Foundation. I was like, no, that's not a good name. In Linkin Park, I was like, yeah, that one works. And the band's like, okay, that's gonna be our name. And then so they released the album under the name Hybrid Theory. So
Right.
and it became it instantly when it became huge on it was a band that came out of nowhere. Nobody had ever heard of them. They had never played it. I think they played one show, and it hit radio. Radio embraced it, and people reacted. So there's no set formula when it comes to signing an artist. And nowadays, every record label thinks, oh, you have to have, at least 500,000 followers to 1 million. They have to be engaged, blah, 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 blah. Nobody wants to take the chance. Nobody on developing an artist and without a following. It's just too much risk. They don't want to do the work. The record labels won't do it. But thankfully, we made it through and persevered, and the album became massive right out of the gates.
Jeez. That's just amazing. I mean, that's insane to hear that from your perspective. It literally feels like I'm in a movie right now. And I mean, with all that stress and all that stuff that's going on, I feel like the mental health of these artists and just even yourself, like you guys are going through a lot with just constant, nonstop new things coming in the way of you guys hitting your success peak. And with a lot of these music legends, I've kind of noticed that they do have a lot of there's a lot of suicides in the industry.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Would you say, in your opinion, that there's a correlation between mental health and these music singers, artists?
I think anytime you are putting your creative self and you're emoting and you're putting your heart and soul into something, that takes a special type of person to be able to take what they're feeling inside and get on a stage or record something and present it to the world, and to be told, no, you're not good enough, we don't like it. We don't realize how many times we listen to something like, I'm not into that. But for every time you do that, somebody put their heart and soul into something, for the most part. I mean,
Right.
like, this is who I am. I'm putting it out into the world to be judged. And so, of course, there's a mental health aspect. And also, to be able to do that and to have stories to tell, usually you've got to have gone through some adversity in your own life and some torture mentally, and come out through it in an ability to tell that story.
Especially
So-
with that emotion, too.
Yeah, and it's a lot of artists are artists because they have those demons in their past. Those thoughts that haunt them, or those past experiences, and we just don't know about it. But they're able to be artists because that's their only release. The art is a catharsis, And so when you're writing something down, I mean, that's why some psychologists tell you write down everything, right?
Right.
Well, these artists are writing them down and presenting them to the world. So imagine giving your soul to the world and waiting to be judged. And if somebody's like, oh, that person hasn't had a hit in a while, blah blah blah. They're not. I mean, it drowns you and consumes you. And I mean, even when I was getting started, and my parents were like, you're a failure, you're a loser, get out of the house. Like, you have an education and you're trying this, you're on this pipe dream, they would call it. Like, you're a dreamer, you're never going to be successful in the music business. And I was at the point where, and I personally, I don't know if you're aware, but my biological father committed suicide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And he was very successful, but I don't know, as a doctor, but I didn't know him well enough, but there's a history of that. So you combine that with being told you're a failure, get out, you're an embarrassment to our family. And, I had horrible thoughts about, but the difference is taking that, like Linkin Park was able to do in the studio, all that adversity, taking that negativity and turn it into something positive.
Channeling it.
Yeah, and to go, I'm going to prove everyone wrong. But then take that after you've already done it, and like you see some of these stars who have been stars, like everything in entertainment is highs and lows, and everyone, you could argue this, statement or not, everyone wants to see somebody on the top go down. Every day. Why is TMZ so successful? Oh, so and so's in jail. So and so's alleged. Blah blah blah. Right. They love to see you fall. The higher you go, the lower they want to see you fall, because that's entertainment to people, and it's a sick thing.
It's so sick.
But there's people behind those stories.
It's truth, though. Yeah.
And it gets exhausting. And people, when you're a star, people want part of you. Oh, blah 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 blah. This is and that becomes your identity. Even when I go out and people, introduce me all the time, it's not like, hey, this is Jeff, my buddy. It's like, this is Jeff Blue. He did Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, Macy Gray. He's done this. He's the head of this, blah, blah, blah. And that's your identity. And at some point, that sucks the soul out of you, man. And imagine what it's like to be an artist and not to have any recognition of who you truly are emotionally and like just as a general human being. And you're just, this is who he was, or this is who he is in the end, like, do you hear me? Like, your identity is wrapped up in that. So mental health, you're struggling to be heard. You're struggling to put your life story and your emotions and channeling all that into a recorded medium for everybody in the world to judge. Of course, it's going to affect your mental health. It's all intertwined, and that's unfortunately why there's a lot of drug addiction, and some artists feel they can only write when they're under some type of influence, where it not everyone obviously, but that's why there is a high incidence of all this. And it's I think education into mental health in entertainment is really, really important.
That makes sense. That does make sense. That's crazy that you have that experience as well too.
Yeah, it's not I mean, it's everyone goes through this, whether they're trying to be successful in something or they get lost, and it's like, especially now with social media.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're being judged now more than ever. Everybody's, everything seems fake.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm here, my life's great. You don't see too many people going, hey, this is what I'm going through, et cetera. It's all like, hey, look at me, I'm in, blah, blah, blah. I'm at this concert, life is great.
I'm visiting, I'm
and
traveling the world. Yeah.
It almost makes you feel worse. Like, hey, my life isn't great. And I'm looking at everybody else and their lives are great. So yeah, I think in general, mental health is super important for everybody. But as an artist, you're putting your soul and your heart and your emotion out there to be judged. And people judge it, and they're cruel.
Yeah, they are. A lot of haters out there, but I appreciate you sharing that. This is definitely deep, especially your perspective and your experience. You definitely have more than most people would in this industry, specifically with artists that do deal with this stuff. So it's very eye-opening for you to say that and be able to hear that perspective for sure. But we'll get into that another time. But I want to kind of ask you so you've been in these shoes. You've kind of been an artist, right? So you can kind of go into depth on your experiences on through these shoes.
Well, that's what I think makes a good A&R executive, somebody who's discovering artists, is the ability to be in some artist's shoes. Like, hey, I've been a songwriter, producer, I've been a musician. So yeah, I was in a rock band, and I've been a musician, but I also, and I don't know if you know, I won BMI awards for, biggest song of the year, type stuff. I had #1 hits in, like dozens of countries as a songwriter, and I've had 4 publishing deals, and publishers, the people who own your copyrights to your songs, I would come in with some songs, and I've had my boss at Universal go, yeah, that song's not good. This song's not. And I would get crushed. I'm like, I got a hit for this artist, and they're like, no, that's not good. And you have to have a thick skin, and so that's why I tell artists, I'm like, hey, I've been there. I've been in your shoes. Me being blunt with you, like the way I was with Mike, I was treating him like I knew I was being treated for many, many years as an artist, being like, hey, this isn't good, blah, blah, blah. But it does wreck you. Right. It does, like you come in with like, hey, I've just created the best thing ever. And you learn that no matter what you think, somebody's going to say it's not good enough. So yeah, I've been an artist, and yeah, I've written for Macy Gray, Hoobastank, tons of stuff. I had a #1 hit with The Last Good Night, Pictures of You. Endless. But it is difficult, man. Mentally, it's very, very difficult.
I could see that. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment out of everything in your career? What would you say that is?
Wow, I've had Linkin Park, Macy Gray, Matchbox, Korn, we said Biscuit. So many different artists. Linkin Park was obviously the biggest, but I had one artist who I actually moved into my house, and we recorded an album. And we were rejected by everybody. And 3 years I stayed with that. And we redid the songs over and over, and just were so passionate about it. And I finagled my way into a development deal with a label, and we got a deal with Virgin Records. And I produced, co-wrote, played the drums on, A&R'd, and published this album.
Oh, God.
And we won a BMI award for one of the biggest songs of the year.
That's awesome.
And it went #1 in like a dozen countries. And whenever I go to Australia, it's been since 2007, I still hear that song on every radio station all the time.
That's amazing.
There's a song called Pictures of You, and I won a BMI award. So for me, the biggest, I've won, tons of platinum awards, but getting an award as a songwriter,
right,
that really meant a lot, because it was like, hey, you touched my life, something that you wrote. And I wrote lyrics and whatnot, and being able to touch somebody's life and have them sing back what you created is such a blessing. I can't tell you. When they sing it back, they're like, oh my God, and they'll sing it. I'm like, God, what that came out of my brain.
Right.
And they're like, it's
relating with that emotion,
To me, that's the biggest accomplishment. It's not the most glorious one, but every time somebody sings back my songs to me, that's the biggest accomplishment ever.
That's awesome. That makes sense. Well, I think we'll call it there. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey man, thank you.
You have an amazing career. You got amazing stories and experience. We're gonna have to bring you on another time, and I appreciate you coming in.
Hey, thanks, Kyle.
Olé.